Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
Great morning, world. Just noticed, Chicken and I have been watching this show, Ted Lasso. I don't know if there's any Ted Lasso fans there. We'll throw a hashtag in there. We love it. But I noticed that Ted Lasso has copied the Rise Up with Dragon theme and show. He walked into the office the other day and greeted all of his co-workers with a great morning. So Ted, I have my eye on you. I know that you're listening to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast. I'm flattered. And if you ever do that hashtag, throw the credit where credit is due. So great morning, everyone. As a reminder, it is the goal of this podcast to remove the blindfolds of your programmed mind and widen your field of consciousness so that the full spectrum of your great potential becomes available to you. We do this with our podcast, weekly blog called The Dragon's Lair, One from the Vault, and our upcoming online courses and books. Today, it gives me great pleasure to let you know that the Rise Up a Dragon podcast is officially sponsored by Karma Mind. Get into the float state with Karma Mind meditations and gear. So welcome to another Rise Up with Dragon. So today, the Rise Up today is something that is unique and different, and you'll see that the word that we're going to unpack and discover and use today is demythologization, and I'll get into that. But I just want to share that this is once again another one of my my Rise Ups that I do in my process that'll come out in our 15 days of discipline, and I'll teach everybody my process that I've been doing for about 15 years. So I'm going to share that with you, but sometimes in the journaling process, I'll be focused on one thing and I'll get creative about it, but then I'll come up with another idea for another Rise Up and I'll start it. So I just want to share just an insight of probably our next blog that's coming out in the newsletter. And it's called Rising Like the Sun. Now, I'm not going to get into all of it, but just the connection I made. I was looking outside at the sun and recognizing that without fail, the sun rises every day. And then in observation, because it's all about observation, you know, the interface response system is a lot about observation. In observation of the sun, I wasn't looking directly into it, but in observation of the sun, I was also recognizing that the sun was rising and doing its job regardless of yesterday and tomorrow, meaning it's subjected to the same things that we are, but every single day, without fail, it rises. Sometimes it's blocked and we don't feel it, so the impact of it is different every now and then. So I'm motivated and inspired today and offering that to you to rise like the sun. And I think that the interface response system is all about teaching us how to do that or equipping us with the knowledge. So let's get into demythologization. I have to give a disclaimer as I get into this because on the Rise Up with Dragon show, when we have guests and everything, if we ever touch on things like religion or, you know, propaganda or anything like that, I want everyone to know that Dragon is in a place that's neither here nor there. I'm not attached to anything. Now, what's interesting about that is if I talk about something and somebody challenges me on it, like make an assumption that I go this way or that way, and then I say, oh, no, I was just fascinated by both ways. What's interesting is the conversation changes from somebody looking to blame. This is just a fascinating observation. I spent most of my life doing this. The conversation will change from somebody looking to accuse and blame, and then when somebody finds out that, no, I'm not attached to that, what they'll then do is ask me if I am attached to what they're attached to, and if I'm not attached to that either, the blame comes back. Just a fascinating dynamic about these crazy humans. I'm one of them. I just like to think that I'm just in a different state. So let's talk about demythologization. Look it up. It's a pretty cool word. So here's what it means if you look it up. It says to eliminate all mythical elements from, and in parentheses, a piece of writing, especially the Bible. So what it's talking about is the word was originally created to like clarify things in the Bible. So as to arrive at the essential meaning. Isn't this fascinating as you look at the interaction and interfacing with things and people? You know, I think for the most part, we're all in observation like detectives of intention, right? So what we're all doing is trying to discover and you know, identify and unveil intentions. But I just love this idea of learning how to demythologize what it is that you initially see. And that leads back to the conversation I had with the disclaimer. So what an awesome word that resonates with me big time, as you can imagine. To eliminate all mythical elements of something so as to arrive at an essential meaning. Now look at everything that I talk about with the interface response system. We know and we accept, we radically accept that we're all wired a certain way, and it's not our fault. Forgive yourself, for you know not what you do. You've been programmed for thousands and thousands of years to think and feel a certain way, and that's fine. And we get into the fact that thoughts don't have to become your reality. But when you gain the ability, you know, it was a big leap when we identified Viktor Frankl's way of putting it about distancing yourself between the stimulus and the response and gaining control of what is controllable, the response, and gaining access to a more logical and rational part of your brain. So we're irrational people, and the goal is to try to access rational. So to arrive at an essential meaning, isn't that an interesting goal to set today, to be in observation with the goal of arriving at an essential meaning and one that's actually relevant. And sometimes that means to get rid of something. So the concept of demythologization comes from a guy named Rudolf Bultmann, Bultmann, and he was a prominent he was a prominent theologian and New Testament scholar. So there's the religious thing that I was giving the disclaimer for. And that was in the 20th century. So Bultmann believed that the New Testament, now I'm flying blind here, I don't know about this stuff. The New Testament was simply the human account of the writer's divine encounter with God and Christ. So isn't that interesting? Now, it depends on who is evaluating this New Testament, right, and what their belief is. But from this person's vantage point, he was looking at this New Testament as the human account of the writer's divine encounter with God and Christ. So already there's a in a detective fashion, you know, hey, is that fact or fiction? And then there's this whole interaction about this desire to be right and prove and all that stuff. But according to Bultmann, the gospel writers used the only terms and concepts that they had available to them at the time. And those terms and concepts were inextricably bound to the miraculous and supernatural. Hard to talk about the miraculous and supernatural from a place of mathematics and science, right? Which Bultmann saw as a myth, right? So Bultmann saw things that were miraculous and supernatural, probably a scientific mind as a theologian, as you know, potential myth. So I don't personally, and this is back to my disclaimer, I don't personally take a stance on what was or was not essentially the truth, because I think that we decide. The truth is whatever you decide the truth is. And until somebody tells you that you're wrong, and then the interface between two people that are claiming to be right is only going to be won by somebody's resolve and resilience, you know? So that's a fascinating thing. We could write a whole book on that. By the way, very, very inspired and getting a lot of creative ideas to polish up and clean up my book by reading this fantastic book by the amazing Robert Greene, who one of my goals is to get him on the podcast. So I'm going to keep coming, Robert. But I'm reading his book, Laws of Human Nature, and just mowing through it. Thank you, Jim Quick. And this book right here is just talking about people, and it's just super cool. I think a great idea, if you want to learn more about people, is read the book Sapiens to kind of know where we're from, and that will arm you with understanding why we do what we do and why we think the way we think, and learning more about people. You know, if you learn more about people, you'll learn more about yourself, and you'll understand from an empathetic place why the person you're talking to does what they do. So I don't take a stance on that stuff, what is or, isn't the truth when it comes to religion. And I feel that we, what the seekers seek, right? We're all seekers. We're all seeking something, unconscious or conscious. But what the seekers seek, they see and believe. And that's cool with me. When I meet somebody that is claiming that they believe something, and they're stating a fact, and they don't even know it unconsciously, they're putting an exclamation point at the end. I like to look at them kind of like an undiscovered country, or as I say sometime in my writings, the way that I look at the underside of a rock that I've turned over. I don't connect it with me and what I think. I just say, as I always say, and I just find it fascinating. It's just a discovery. When I hear you say what it is, I don't have an opinion on it, right? Because I'm going to take some time before I do that, and that's the interface response system. So that's cool with me is, I have my own, right? So if you hear me talking right now, you aren't not to buy into everything that I say, and maybe take a little bit of time to think about it and see if it's relevant to you. When I read books and I listen to podcasts, I find a lot of it interesting, but I always filter it and identify, kind of like a bouncer checking IDs, I always filter it and identify what it is that is in support of where I want to go and not, so I don't have to take everything. When I used to read, I used to take notes on everything I wrote. It was like I would rewrite the book that I was reading. But as I go, and this is another thing that I got from reading a lot, thank you, Jim Quick, I started to recognize to only take down the things, not that I found interesting, but that I found useful. So anyway, here I go. I digress. However, I know that as we humans struggle a lot due to some myths that we've been taught in our programming about ourselves and about life in general, that have the tendency to run our lives and call our shots. We speak a lot about that on the podcast, is identifying that a lot of things that we think, which trigger feelings and create perceptions, are not necessarily our concepts. They've been taught to us since birth. For all of you new parents out there, if you want to be a good parent, love your kids. But if you want to be a tactically good parent and give your kids the best shot, just become aware, self-aware and conscious of what it is that you're programming into them, right? And it's not necessarily what they need. So what are some myths that you've bought into about yourself? Are things like timing, like this is what we speak about a lot with our coaching program. When people come in and they say, hey, now's the time, I'm ready to lose weight, I'm ready to get healthy, I'm ready to build a business, and I'm ready to become this next person. I always like to ask them, why now? And what they'll typically say is that, it's the right time, I really feel confident and I believe in myself and I'm highly motivated. And then what people don't know in that moment is that they've somehow convinced themselves, and there's the potential myth, that they are that way. And the other danger, number two, is that if they don't wake up with the same feelings tomorrow, they will have a different approach to going after their dreams. So I always like to say, case in point, that you don't have to believe in yourself. It doesn't need to be the right time, and you don't even need to be motivated to move forward in life. You just have to identify what you want and have it be so important you'll do it no matter what. So, but maybe that's a myth as well. So, do you sometimes, talking to you now, do you sometimes feel like you are at a disadvantage in life due to your circumstances? Think about that. So, Jim Defmer talks about being above and below the line. So when we're below the line in this drama triangle, sometimes we create this perception that we're a victim of circumstance, and it gives us this frustrating feeling of feeling like we're at a disadvantage. So do you sometimes feel like you must fight, the self-defeating thoughts in your head that tell you what you can or can't do? Do you find yourself battling with those thoughts? I find that anytime I have a bout of depression or anxiety or worry or concern, what I'm doing is it's a struggle. It's an internal struggle that's manifesting as a feeling. But what I'm doing is I'm fighting against thoughts in my head. I'll give you an example. I experienced high anxiety just the other day. And the reason why, I didn't know why, but I actually felt like I had heart pain. And you have to know something if you've never met me. I'm in very, very good shape. I'm 50 years old, but I eat as clean as anyone you know, and I do everything right. I get sleep and low stress and all that stuff. But all of a sudden, I'm feeling like I'm challenged. And then I use the interface response system, and I identify the reason why I'm actually feeling that way is because I'm stressed and worried about my son, my 17-year-old, who's trying out for this really, really hard to get on hockey team, and the odds are against him and things like that. And I love him so much, and he works so hard. So that was creating this internal dialogue in my head, which normally before I started to do the work with the IRS, I would unconsciously let that happen and not identify it. But now that I do the IRS and I look at things holographically and I become aware of everything, I identified, I'm stressed out. And in my mind, the dialogue is that I'm worried that he's going to get overlooked and he's going to experience failure and all that stuff. So by doing that and identifying, I began the process of healing. And I'm happy to say that my son made the team, by the way. So I'm so excited about that. So I slept well that night. So do you sometimes feel like you must fight that self-defeating thought in your head that's telling you what you can or can't do, or it's making you worry? Well, like I just said, I struggle with that too. So in fact, I used to refer, case in point, how did I become the dragon? I used to refer to these outside and inside negative thoughts and feelings as dragons, swooping over my head with the introduction of plaguing my mind with concepts of self-worth, victimization, and pending doom that I was destined to experience. So let me explain what that means. Those feelings that I'm talking about, I used to try to identify what it was because, like guilt, you can't really, when you're having a negative thought, you can picture it in your mind, but you can't really identify it as something real. It's like a thing and it's happening in the future or the past, right? So you kind of know that you're overthinking something, but I came up with this graphic and this visual that when I was feeling like that, it was the likes of these frightening fire-breathing dragons that were swooping over my head and instilling this concept of potential pending doom in my life. So that was, the culmination of where dragons came from. So this led to things like, the side effects of that were depression, anxiety, which basically set up camp in my brain because I was unconscious of the feedback loop and the trigger and everything. I was just allowing my evolutionized, programmed, analytical mind to call the shots. I was in reactive mode, right? I was in the drama triangle. I was a victim of it. It was happening to me. And I think everybody can resonate with that. So naturally, I gave these dragons, in this sense, I gave these dragons power and somehow thought that my goal in life, should I want to succeed? This was the evolution. I said, well, if I want to succeed and the problem is these dragons, then I would need to learn how to fight them off. Now, what's interesting about fighting your fears, a lot of people say, fight back, fight your fears. What I noticed is that I decided to become a dragon slayer. So that was part of my personal growth and self-discovery is I started to become a fear kicker, and I read a lot of books and I heard a lot of people speak about facing your fears and all that stuff. And that is an important part of it. You have to first confront them rather than, not know. But when you confront them, they become even more real. Think about that for a second. When you confront your fears or fight them, you actually give them value. Because if there weren't actual dragons flying over my head, but here I am. Now I'm a dragon slayer fighting things that aren't there, right? So it's definitely part of the process to get there. You don't just like snap your finger and become friends with the monster in the closet. But it wasn't until, sorry, excuse me, it wasn't until I started doing the work with the interface response system, which is coming out in my book, and learning the skills. One of the steps of the interface response system is to learn the skill of holographic vision and also cognitive distancing with the concept of right, distancing yourself from the stimulus. That's when I gained the ability to see that I gained the insight and the ability to see that I was actually fighting things that didn't even exist. So here we go back to demythologization. By fighting such things, in fact, I brought them into further existence. I brought them out of the dark and into the light. Actually made them real. So, I would assume, and, I'm flying blind here, I would assume that, a lot of disorders are occurring in brains that are so committed to something that they get to a point where it's very, very hard to believe that they are not things, right? And that's when we need to intervene and, let medicine take a role in forcing your brain to not see these things, right? The challenge with that, and you can ask somebody that's on some sort of a medication, hey, what do you think about getting off that med? That brings the fear back, and they say, well, if I get off the med, I'm going to go back to the dragons, and I don't want that anymore. So I have a lot of empathy for those people, and do I believe that they can, wean off of that? Yes, I do believe it, but I have no grounds to say that because I've never been them. So I prefer to just rest empathetically for them. But the idea is that by unveiling the truth, or the true potential, that the very idea of these dragons, these fire-breathing dragons, represented a myth. Here's what I did. I actually went on Google and I did a little bit of research on dragons. Here's the funny thing. We watch so many movies about fire-breathing dragons like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. Sometimes you can catch your brain forgetting that they're not even real. Think about that for a second. So I started to do a little bit of research just to convince myself. It was part of my healing. And I saw that dragons represented a myth that many cultures, fascinating, gave value to. If you go back, people spoke about dragons for so many years. And a lot of myth things were spoken about back in the day, which also makes you say, when it comes to religion, right? You have to question what is a mythological creature and what is not. And then we also identify that human beings have the ability to take a mythical creature and actually campaign for it to the point where it's real and it becomes real only because everybody's bought into it. So now step back in observation at what's going on in our world even today, and you see people, you can have 1 million people on one side and 1 million on the other that are completely at odds in what is reality. Now look at politics, for instance. Here's the way I look at it. I looked at it that like religion. If I see 2 or more groups of people that all distinctly believe in something different, my observation is that when I'm seeking the deep truth about something, that means that somebody's got to be wrong. Now, I don't care who's right or wrong, but I just, in observation, when I see all of these things happening on the news, the news that you will receive will actually depend and correlate to the side of this face-off that is supported by that news channel. So I always looked at that and religion and all of these things in saying somebody's wrong. So the position I always took was one of curiosity and slowing down my decision-making process. This is a big reason I created the interface response system. Slowing down my response system and my reactionary system because it was obvious that somebody's wrong, right? And then the campaign there is like, it's not about that, it's about faith and stuff. So you're saying you're not sure that it's wrong. Anyway, I'm probably going to get some emails for that. So anyway, the idea of a fire-breathing dragon, that these cultures talk about, and gave value to, regardless of their never actually seeing one. There's never been a fire-breathing dragon sighting to date. Now, I can't campaign and say that proves it, because maybe somebody out there has seen one, and UFOs fall into this same thing, because sometimes we think we see something. You can convince your brain to the point where you can actually think you see something too, which I think is pretty cool as we move into the metaverse and this whole new universe of virtual reality and not knowing the difference. I mean, that we might be in virtual reality right now. We might be totally in a virtual world that somebody's watching, and we've just been here so long that we think it's our reality. Which is interesting if you talk to somebody like Donald Hoffman about like, what is the deep truth? What is behind the curtain? I'm getting off right now, but I think it's pretty cool. I don't know if we can handle it. If we are living in a simulation in a virtual reality right now, and we all of a sudden backed up and looked at what everybody else is seeking as reality, maybe it would be too much to handle. Right? Maybe you wouldn't be able to handle it. Maybe we're better off in here, and maybe that's why we're now recognizing we need a new reality that suits us better, right? Maybe this whole concept of the metaverse and us being avatars in another world, maybe that's a new line of cocaine or some sort of a distraction from the reality right now that is unsettling to us. Maybe we're running away again from another reality. Maybe 300 years from now, our kids are going to look at this reality when we talk about it like somebody might look at religion or a dragon, right? And just be so convinced that it didn't happen. What a cool thing it is to be a human being that's actually using their brain. Anyway, I guess that's a campaign for drugs too, because you can go into any universe you want. So this breakthrough that I'm talking about, it's now yours, this breakthrough. And I hope, I always want to know if this stuff makes sense, but that's my offering is to you today, is it's a breakthrough. It's yours. What concepts and beliefs do you feel and give value to that just simply are myths when you actually take the time and evaluate them? When you check the facts, identify they only exist from secondhand gossip and programming, or a belief system, right, that was programmed into your mainframe by others. And when we're in the developmental phase of being a child, it's very easy because we're just like soaking up and we're saying, tell me what reality is so I can go, so I can enjoy this. I've got these eyes, this ears, and this nose, and this mouth, and all that stuff, and skin and senses. Tell me what all this means. So we're actually programming, in my book, our virtual reality suit to perceive reality. But what's interesting about all that is just becoming aware of like, what is it? And as we become adults, just like kids, we actually just consciously decide to consume certain things, which continues the programming, and I've spoken a lot about that today. We're consciously consuming stuff that is further entrenching us in this reality. So the idea is next, take that fear and concept and get close with it to expose it as an imposter, or maybe get so close to your biggest fear, dragons, maybe get so close to your biggest fear that you actually can learn how to partner with it, demythologize it, and take it on like the dragon has, like me, right? I look at becoming the dragon when somebody says, who are you? And I look at that. I love that movie Avatar, and that scene where the avatar gets on that kind of flying little dragon, once you get a dragon, and then takes its and bonds with it and becomes one, and that's how they can fly around and think together and just bond. That's kind of why I call myself the dragon, is I took my biggest fear and I actually partnered with it, as my personality. And then my final thought is, does this shit make any sense to you? If it does, let me know. So love and appreciate you all. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Feedback is really important. I hope that you've taken the step and gotten my free newsletter that keeps you up to date and pulls awesome things from the vault. Please go give us a rating on iTunes, and that is at the Rise Up with Dragon podcast. This is done. You can find us on Rise Up with Dragon, the YouTube channel, so you can see these live and our interviews and the show notes and fun resources and links. And then also, if you go to riseupwithdragon.com, you can sign up for our newsletter there and all of that stuff. So love and appreciate you all. Have an amazing day.